Initiation into Hermetics. The spirit. It has been said before that man has been created in the image of God and consists of body, soul, and spirit. The preceding chapters have made it evident that body and soul serve only as a veil or garment for the spirit. The spirit is the immortal part and the image of God. It is not easy to define something divine, immortal, imperishable, and to put it into the correct terms. But here, as well as with any other problem, the key of the four-pole magnet will be a great help for us. From the supreme prototype, Akasha, original source of all beings, has proceeded the spirit, the spiritual ego, with the four specific elemental qualities proper to the immortal spirit, which was created in God's image. The fiery principle, the impulsive part, means the will, volition. The airy principle shows up in the intellect, mind. The watery principle, respectively, in the life and the feeling, and the earthy principle is representing the union of all the three elements in the consciousness of the ego. All the other qualities of the spirit are based upon these four original principles. The typical part of the fifth, say the etheric principle, Akasha, manifests itself in the highest aspect, in the faith, and in the lowest form, in the instinct of self-preservation. Each of these mentioned four elemental principles has many other aspects corresponding to the law of analogy of the polarity or the positive and negative elements. All of them together form the ego or the spirit. For this reason, we can make responsible the fiery principle for strength, power, and passion. Memory, power of discrimination, and judgment are ascribed to the airy principle. Conscience and intuition to the principle of water, egotism and the instincts of self-preservation and propagation to the earthy part of the spirit. It will be too long to quote all the properties of the spirit with regard to the elements. The incipient adept can enlarge these qualities by serious studies and deep meditation with respect to the analogous laws of the four-pole magnet. This happens to be a very meritorious work which never ought to be neglected because it will lead to great success and secure results. These three chapters relating to the body, soul and spirit have represented man in his most perfect form. By now the disciple ought to have realized how very important it is to know one's own microcosm for the initiation and especially for the magic and the mystic practice. As a matter of fact, for the whole of the secrets, most of the authors, from sheer ignorance or for other cogent reasons, have omitted this extremely important part, the foundation. The mental sphere. The mental plane. The mental plane. As the body has its earthly plane and the astral body or the soul owns the astral plane, the spirit too has its own plane, the so-called mental plane or mental sphere. This is the mental sphere with all its virtues. Both these spheres, the material as well as the astral one, have been born from the Akasha or original principle of the respective sphere, through the four elements, and also the mental sphere is built upon the same foundation, and therefore likewise a product of the Akasha principle of the spirit. Similar to the spirit, developing in a four-pole magnet by corresponding work and showing an electromagnetic fluid analogous to the astral body on account of the effect of the elements as a secondary phenomenon of the polarity. On the outside, the mental body develops in the mental or spiritual sphere. Just in the same way as the astral body, through the electromagnetic fluid of the astral world, forms an astral matrix, the so-called astral odd, the electromagnetic fluid of the mental world forms a mental matrix linking the mental body to the astral body. This mental matrix, or the mental odd, the so-called mental substance, is the subtlest form of akasha which controls and preserves the spiritual activity in the astral body. At the same time, this mental substance is electromagnetic and is regarded as leader of the ideas to consciousness of the spirit, from where it is put into activity through the astral and the roughly material body. So this mental matrix, or the mental odd, with its double pole fluid, is the subtlest substance we can imagine in the human body. Simultaneously, the mental sphere is the sphere of thoughts which have their origin in the world of ideas, consequently in the spiritual akasha. Each thought is preceded by a basic idea which, according to its property, accepts a definite form and arrives to the consciousness of the ego through the etheric principle, consequently the mental matrix, as expression of the thought in the shape of a plastic picture. Therefore, man himself is not the founder of the thoughts, but the origin of each thought is to be sought in the supreme akasha sphere, or the mental plane. Man's spirit, as it were, is the receiver, the antenna of thoughts from the world of ideas, according to the situation in which man happens to be. The world of ideas being all in all, each new idea, new invention, in short, all man believes to have created by himself, has been brought out of this world of ideas. This production of new ideas depends on the maturity and attitude of the spirit. Each thought involves an absolutely pure element, especially if the thought implies abstract ideas. If the thought is based on several combinations of the ideal world, different elements are effective in their form as well as in their mutual emanation. Only abstract ideas have pure elements and pure polar emanations, as they descend directly from the causal world of an idea. From this cognition, we may draw the conclusion that there are pure electric, pure magnetic, indifferent and neutral ideas from the standpoint of their effect. According to the idea, each thought in the mental sphere has its own form, colour and vibration. Through the tetrapolar magnet of the spirit, the thought arrives at the consciousness, from where it is forwarded to realization. Each thing created in the material world consequently has its cause in the ideal world through the thought and the spiritual consciousness, and is reflected therein. If the point in question is not exactly an abstract idea, several forms of ideas can be expressed. Such thoughts are electric or magnetic or electromagnetic according to the elemental property of the idea. The material plane is bound to time and space. The astral plane, sphere of the perishable or mutable spirit, is bound to space. The mental sphere being timeless and spaceless. The very same thing happens with all the mental properties. The reception of a thought in the mental body through the link of the astral and mental matrix bound to space and time in the total form needs a certain amount of time to become fully conscious of this thought. Turning the page. According to the mental maturity, the train of thoughts is different in each individual. The more advanced, the more cultured man is, the faster thoughts will develop in mind. Likewise, as the astral plane is inhabited, so is the mental plane too. Besides the ideal forms, there are principally the deceased ones, whose astral bodies have been dissolved by the elements in the course of their ripening and allotted according to the degree of perfection to regions corresponding to their mental sphere. Besides the mental sphere is the sphere of the so-called elementals, beings created consciously or unconsciously by man as a result of repeated and intense thinking. An elemental being is not yet so much condensed to form or to assume any astral shape for itself. Its influence is therefore limited to the mental sphere. The difference between an ideal form and an elemental lies in the fact that the ideal form is based on one or several ideas. On the other hand, the elemental is equipped with a certain quantity of consciousness and therefore with the instinct of preservation, but otherwise it does not much distinguish from other mental living beings. It can even take the same shape as the ideal form. The adept often resorts to these elemental beings. How to create such an elemental, how to preserve it, and how to utilize it for certain purposes. This problem will be approached in the practical part of this book. There will be still quite a lot to be said about the particular specific properties of some beings. But all that we have pointed out previously should be sufficient to stimulate the work and contribute to a succinct enlightenment about the mental plane.